things another way. But I will say through this process, we've been able to learn a lot from the community and to try to continue to find new and different ways to address these problems. But there are problems that plague our state and plague our area. And the sad thing is, the second grader in the classroom could care less about what happens with funding in Lansing or what's happening with the politics of education. They just want to get a good education. And through all of this, that's what I think that we all continue to try and stay focused on. When I look at the kindergartner in the classroom, how do I make sure when they're in this seat in 9th grade, we have the quality education that we know we want for them? And so what I want to do first off is recognize many of the people that work with your children day in and day out. If I can have all the administrators stand up for a minute. We can do a big round of applause. And that's all I got to do tonight. You're good to go. Oh, no, not you, Butler. Not you. You get to stay for extended time, Mr. Butler. I also like to thank a group of people that have been spending an awful lot of time on this issue and will continue to, is our Board of Education. If our Board of Education members that are here, if you can please stand for a second so we can acknowledge all the hard work that you're doing. Thank you. I know Mr. Kevin Deacon Krause is sick this evening, is not able to get out of his bed this evening. These are all the people that are working to try and make sure that our path forward is positive. So, as we look at this tonight, where did we start from? 2012, as a community, there was a strategic planning process that started. In 2013, it was board approved. This is a process many community members took part of. The 3 legs of this plan are achievement, sustainability, equity. The reason we're here this evening is not because Blake Pruitt, as a new superintendent, wanted to do this. The reality is this is the last thing a new superintendent wants to do in their first year in a district. But through the strategic plan, and part of the process of the board hiring me was making sure they had a superintendent that was going to implement the strategic plan. So that's why we're moving forward with it. And it talks about this year being the development of the elementary and secondary restructuring with implementation in 16-17 year. So that's been the charge that I've been given and my administration has been working on. What are some of the reasons why this was looked at? The achievement and opportunity gap. The fact that we get less and less money from the state. That we've been existing on alternative ed funds. The loss of student enrollment, which is county and statewide. Our lottery system, which many people see as a negative thing. So the mission is Ferndale Public Schools' mission is to provide all students with exceptional education that prepares them for college, careers, and success in a diverse society. That's what, as a community, was agreed upon in the strategic plan. Tonight's goals will be some findings and recommendations. This is for elementary and secondary restructuring based upon the strategic plan of achievement, sustainability, and equity. As for recommendations, they move forward to the board. There's a study session on Thursday at 5:30. That is where the board works with those recommendations. And then it's up to the board in the terms of what happens at that point. If to move on the recommendations, to change recommendations, ask my administration to go back and look at other things. There's a number of different things that can happen. So what does the plan say about achievement? All students can learn what they need if we have high expectations and have the right support from us. We must help our students love learning and make them ready for college, careers, and lifelong education. I don't think anyone would disagree with that be the goal of what we're doing. Sustainability. Funds for public education are limited and declining. If you didn't know, we just got hit from the state for a $200,000 bill 2 Fridays ago, because they were supposed to give every district money for retirement, and they decided that on the governor's budget amendment, they weren't going to pay it. That's a $200,000 bill the district wasn't prepared for. No district was prepared for. This is millions of dollars. So we know the state continues to not give us the funds we need. We must make the best possible use of our financial and human resources to strive to keep enrollment at optimal levels by advocating for fair and adequate public funding. We have to live within our means. So what do we see across? This is from last week. Lake Orion Schools needs to cut nearly $1 million expenditures by fall. That means they need to cut it out of this year's budget if they want a balanced budget by the new school year. This was earlier in the year. Rochester Schools issuing mid-year layoffs for $1.2 million, first time ever in their history. There's an article last week, Brandon Schools is going to be cutting $1 million going into next year. If you haven't paid attention, our neighbor Hazel Park is upwards to anywhere from $9 to $12 million in debt next year. So this is even within our backyard. And over 80,000 students left Michigan last year. So this is a Michigan-wide problem. This is not just a Ferndale problem that we're experiencing. So what are some of the facts? We've lost 2,000 in fund equity in the last 2 years. We have about 2,000 left. So if we continue to do what we've been doing, we have about 1 or 2 years left. Based upon everything we're looking at, we're overspending by about $1.5 million a year, give or take. And we've been relying on profit from our alternative education, which there is a lot of competition in that area. So one thing that I am asked a lot is, Blake, how do you define equity? What does equity look like? And what I keep going back to is what the strategic plan says. That's what we've been basing what we do. Social and individual differences must not determine achievement. Each and every student deserves equal access to support and resources necessary for learning. So in the strategic plan, it says focused attention on the needs of the continuum of students, from advanced through at-risk, including special education, all our students. Equity of resources across buildings and across programs. Deliberate effort to close race and socioeconomic related achievement gaps. Sensitivity to differing cultures and backgrounds, ensuring culture competency and awareness. If there was an easy way to do this as a community, we would be doing it. This is hard work every community faces. And there is not one answer that I can give tonight that will solve this. But we can make changes in the right direction. So what's been our process? Since my team started in July, we were requested to gather a multitude of data on achievement, sustainability, and equity. We presented all that information to the board and then presented that to the community in January. Since that time, and if you think about, it's been a little over 5 weeks since that first presentation. It hasn't been a ton of time. In that time, we've had our online forum talk to us, attended PTA meetings, superintendent's advisory. We've had different focus groups. We've been doing different evaluations of our buildings, been doing city and township meetings and board study sessions. This has all taken place during the month of February. So I also wanted to bring you something new. Next year, we are going to be a Wayne State Partnership School District. They're looking for school districts where they can help train teachers. And instead of just putting them all over the state, they wanted to focus in on certain school districts. We're one of the few school districts that they want to partner with because of what we do. And it stemmed starting from our relationship with University High School and moving from there. So we will see a lot more support from Wayne State starting next year. It's something that we've just been able to kind of get together. And so as we do this work, know that we also have a new partner in this work that will be helping us. So what are our recommendations for implementation in 15-16? Our first area we looked at was preschool. We had meetings with teachers, with the PTA, with parent focus groups and administrators. These meetings focused on a 5 to 10-year view of the program, looking at achievement, sustainability, and equity. Some of the key findings that we found from meeting with these different groups is they want to see programs together in one building. They want an updated building or fix the current building they're in. We need the ability to expand. We turned away over 30 parents that wanted preschool in Ferndale, but due to our lack of ability to give services, because right now we offer mostly half days, not full days, we don't offer before or after care, and we don't offer care during breaks in the summer. So it makes it very difficult for working parents to use our preschool at times. So we had at least 30 parents that we turned away. And we need to look at offering some sort of transportation, especially for our Head Start in GSRP. So what is our issue with our buildings? When we look at, from both the bond work and from Plant Moran's work put together, there's about $370,000, which is basically roof replacement at Harding, that is due, that can be used with bond funds. Grant needs a roof replacement, a boiler replacement. It has some exterior safety concerns with brick and wall issues, and multiple interior repairs to the tune of about $1.5 million. Based upon the information gathered, the recommendation would be to move all the preschool programming for Harding for the 15-16 year. The building is newer and updated, less expensive to operate and maintain. It has the ability to expand the programs. We have extra rooms where it can be expanded to, providing more space for education, has easy access to freeways for parents, and busing must be, especially from the south end of town, we must have busing if it were to move to Harding. So in that sense, we have been working heavily with Royal Oak Township in the state of Michigan regarding different options for the reuse of the building. At this point, it would be my recommendation we continue that work with Royal Oak Township and make no determination on the Grant building until we can finish that work. We've been making some great headway with the state and with the township of finding some alternative uses for the building that would benefit the township. So I think that we need to continue that work until we can see that through, regardless of the decision on preschool. So that affects central office. The central office, I'd recommend, would move to the 3rd floor where it used to be at the high school, above the elephant stairs. This would combined be about a $200,000 yearly operational savings that we would have by doing this. We would look at keeping communications enrollment at the Harding building, and the rest of central office would move to the high school up on where it used to be at the 3rd floor. Adult alternative education. We have some factors affecting that. We have declining enrollment. At the peak of our alternative education, we had 1,130 students in the program. We currently have about 340 within the program. So we know that's due to a lot of competition in that area. That has grown, especially with charter schools and with many other school districts offering online alternative education. So that market is being saturated. We also know that we have some issues in terms of our achievement and our graduation with that program that affect us. There's also the cutting of state aid, especially to adult education, upwards to 30% within the last 2 years. We need the ability to be near public transportation for those students, and we need to decrease spending on what I would call disposable technology. There was a line item for $500,000 per year for laptops for the DLC. There have been, when I came on, there were a total of 700 laptops that had not been recovered in the last 18 months. This year it's only been about 10. But we need to decrease the spending on technology that's just going out the door. It's not servicing anybody. We need to increase our spending on instruction. We know, working from those teachers and working with the program, that relying on students for profit and not providing them proper instruction is not the right thing to do. But we also need to work on the district not relying on that profit, which has led to our eating into the fund equity the last couple years. We also know that with the Jefferson building, that is probably, that would cost the most amount of money to upkeep, above $1.5 million of work that needs to be done. So the building is in probably the worst shape within the school district. So the recommendation would be for adult and alternative ed that we look at lease space for both programs. This allows the space to adjust to enrollment. It also allows us to move to some blended learning, which would be seat time and online together, which fits more of the style of the education of those students. It will save us hundreds of thousands in building maintenance, not in the short term, but also long term. And the recommendation would be that we take Jefferson offline and look at developing the land with the City of Oak Park. I know that there is a big concern of the community gardens at Jefferson. We would maintain the community gardens at Jefferson as long as the school district owned the property. If for some reason the school district did not own the property, then we'd work with that group to find a garden space elsewhere within the school district so that they can still maintain that. I'd really like to see that group combined with our students, especially we have parents and students within the open classroom program that do a community garden. To be able to use our community resources with that garden and with our students would be a great asset to be able to put that together. So what are the recommendations for 16-17? Our first recommendation is regarding 6th grade. Met with the PTAs, looked at all our data. We know that this building here can house over 2,000. At its height, it housed, I believe, 2,400. We currently have between the middle school and high school about 1,100 students. So we know we can hold plenty more students within the building. Moving 6th grade allows us to do a closure of elementary, which is a $500,000 savings. If you remember, we need to look at about $1.5 million of savings throughout our year to be sustainable. We know that looking at our test scores and looking at what's going to be required of Common Core and of the state required testing, that moving to a more secondary model in 6th grade so that they have subject-specific teachers in front of them. So they have a highly qualified math teacher in front of them, a highly qualified English teacher, because in 6th grade you need to be a generalist right now if you're in elementary school. We're also the only school district in the county that does not have 6th grade within a middle school structure, and most places have moved to it because of that instructional need. It also allows our students to have more electives, fine arts, technology, sports, the pool, all the pieces of this building that they get to be part of. One of the things we're looking at in terms of that transition for the 6th graders. We're looking at multiple activities next year to bring students into this building, interact with the current students. We have teaming of classes, English and social studies together, math and science together, so that they're not moving every hour, so that it is a little bit closer to what they're doing within the current elementary, so it's an easier transition. We look at every student taking fine or performing arts, because when you're in 6th grade, every student takes music and art. So when you go to a middle school and you get to choose, we believe it's very important to continue that arts education and make sure that the students continue on within fine or performing arts. We started to do an 8th grade mentoring program. We're looking at getting some staff members trained at the moment where that every 6th grader would have an 8th grade mentor. That relationship would get established next year so that they would have a group of 8th graders they knew walking in that were their friends, that were willing to help them and take care of them, to create that community for the 6th graders. It's something that's been established in many school districts that have worked very well to create a positive community. So that's something that we would look at to make that transition healthy and easier for the 6th graders. Probably our most difficult decision and work is within the elementary configurations. It's rightfully so, because when your child is little, you want to be sure of where they're at, and you want to know that they are in a great environment. And it's just natural that parents and community members are more involved within the elementary level. And I'll say again, trust me, it would be the easiest thing for me as a superintendent to not take on a task like this. But this is something that within the strategic plan, 14-15 development, 16-17 implementation, based upon the needs that the community saw. And so as we tried to put together different options and opportunities, it was looking at that plan. And I believe the plans that we have both have some great options and have some challenges. There is no perfect plan. One of the things that I've been many questions have been asked as of lately, and rightfully so, was regarding the individual Montessori classroom. So this was a board-approved pilot for ages 6 to 9. It is one classroom, but we've been getting a lot of feedback based upon the models. So we're going to, as an administration, reevaluate where we are with that, especially based upon once a model is chosen. Based upon where it stands at the moment, it is open to any student. It would be fully integrated to school like any other classroom. And within the Model A we'll be showing, it would be within the open building. Within Model C, it would be within the K2 building. We have removed Model B from the recommendation list after listening to the community. So looking at our models. In both models, we put forth as being able to be great for this community either way. And there are excellent pieces in both, and there are challenges in both. If there was the right way to do this, everyone would be doing it. So there are pieces that we're going to have to love and pieces we're going to all have to struggle with in either one. Model A, we've 2 K5s, which would be an open classroom school, and then a Cambridge International School. Model C is looking at bringing everyone together in a K2 school, in a 3-5 campus, which would be a lower campus and upper campus, and using an open classroom philosophy with a Cambridge International curriculum. The teachers, we have some teachers tonight who are going to talk more about the instructional side of it. I want to talk some first about the building side of it. So we've been working with not only the documentation from the bond, the documentation from Plant Moran, and also going back through buildings with administrators, with teachers, and going through what we can do with our different buildings, how we can use our buildings for elementary. It's also been talking with the city and the township officials. What things can we do with buildings or with land? What are our enrollment projections? What's the educational model and instructional space need to match somewhat? We do have, after the high school complex here that the office is done, there's about $4 million remaining in the bond that can be put into the buildings that are not currently allocated for a project. We are also eligible for what's called a federal QZAB funds, so we can actually take some of the energy efficiency pieces that were in the bond that we need to do and apply for the federal funds to do that, to allow us to use a little bit more of the bond money to refit schools into what we need them to be, or to take care of some issues maybe that have come up since the bond. So when we look at where we're currently at, we have a total of about 55 classrooms. You have to remember that depending on if you're using it for a K5 or a K2, you need a band room in a K5, you don't in a K2, as well as music, art, and special education space. So we have about 55 classrooms. K5, we use a total currently of 38 classrooms, and that includes our first fives, which means we have about 17 extra classrooms district-wide, which is about an entire building currently. So what would we need to look at? In a K2-3-5 configuration, looking at about 22, 21 classrooms, we currently use about 21 and 17. Our enrollment projections at best, we're looking to stabilize. There are really no school districts in the county that are experiencing growth, and none are really projected to see growth moving forward. Within a 2K5 model, and it would fluctuate depending on how many classes are in each grade. Currently, our largest class, which is kindergarten, has basically 7 classes. So if we looked at 4 classes and 3 classes, we need one building at about 24 rooms and one at 19. Right now, if we take all the current open classrooms and put them together, we get about 20, and the remainder is about 18 from the brain-based. So if the divide were per se that way, that would be about the division. In all our buildings, we have some spaces that could be renovated into classrooms. And if we look at JFK, we could possibly get up to 21 classrooms with some renovation. Coolidge up to 19, and Taft and Roosevelt up to about 23. That being said, there are some issues in cost, not only with the renovation, but with some things that are going on. Since Plant Moran made their first visit on the 27th, we've been re-looking at all the buildings, looking at various issues. The Taft building, although in very good shape, to repurpose it for an elementary ends up being too costly. There's some HVAC issues, kitchen issues, things that when we started pricing them out were more expensive than were first estimated. We do have roof and boiler replacement at Roosevelt, and we do have roof issues at Coolidge and JFK that need to be addressed within the next couple years. And based upon this, I would not look at repurposing or would not recommend repurposing Taft for an elementary. I don't believe it fiscally makes sense looking at the 3 current buildings that we have for elementary, and we could do some work on any of them to use them to get a couple more classrooms. So what are the building recommendations? And once again, these are fluid when they go to the board. There's a lot of conversation that can happen and things that we can relook at. But in looking at our current buildings and trying to keep close proximity for collaboration and busing, also looking at our current elementary buildings servicing similar ages, parent and community familiarity of buildings, because regardless of any change, we'd like to have familiarity of the buildings. Our Taft property is estimated at about $1.1 million in terms of resale value, and right now that there is a good market in Ferndale for property and to build. And if we're able to use that space to build possibly 25 to 27 homes, then we're looking at possibly new families bringing into Ferndale. Also look at within the Roosevelt building, developing outdoor space and courtyards at Roosevelt. And there is money in the bond that's allocated towards playground and outdoor space. There aren't quite enough rooms, but we don't have any building that has 24 rooms, and that is really looking at a higher projection. So we are our closest with 23. But it's still based upon our current rooms, we still have plenty of room to grow. And currently we are overstaffed by a couple staff members due to the configuration that we have. So we could actually have, currently we hired 2 teachers at the start of the year because we could not move kids in between buildings, when if we could have saved that money, which is equivalent to about $200,000. So in theory, we could have less classrooms even now, but due to the configuration, we aren't really able to do that. It's recommended with UHS that UHS would move to Coolidge in 16-17. It is a high school of 415 students in an elementary building currently. And we have the ability to bring in a little bit more students, but we need instructional space for our high school students at UHS. Our UHS high school is one of the highest performing within the Tri-County area when you look at the social demographics. It is only surpassed by one other school. So it is a very high performing building for the students that are there. Right now they just have a gym, and the gym can't hold the student body. They can't have assemblies, they can't do anything where it brings the community together. They have to play sports at Coolidge currently. Their gym is not large enough to do basketball. Coolidge is a more attractive building for recruitment and retention. And the Wilson property is, again, worth about $1 million and could be also developed into residential, which would allow us to bring in more families with that space. We're going to get into the teachers part here in a minute, for they can talk some about the instructional models. I want to be clear, both models have pros and cons. There isn't anything that's a silver bullet that's going to say this is going to make everything better, that we want to make better. But I think both move the needle. Both move the needle somewhat in different ways. But regardless of whatever is chosen, whatever is implemented, we are going to have to, as a community, as a staff, continue to focus on our achievement, our sustainability, our equity. It's going to be ongoing because the kids deserve it. So there is no magic pill, there is no silver bullet. But I believe both models help us move things forward. They just move things forward in different ways. So one of the things that I want to be able to let you know is you look at the first bar, average school, average teacher, which none of our teachers here are average. They're all above average. It's Lake Wobegon. You're the 50th percentile of students achieving. You have a least effective school, least effective teacher. Your student is in the 3rd percentile. It's a huge drop. If you have an effective school, but not an effective teacher, you're still not hitting that 50 percentile. If you have a most effective school, most effective teacher in the 96th percentile, that's where you get your most gain. Even with a least effective school and a most effective teacher, you're still getting a lot of gain. So this is something that's intuitive. Teachers matter. I'm not in front of the students as a superintendent. Our teachers are. They're the ones that are on the ground floor making the difference. And the great thing about any one of these models is those same people will be in front of your kids. The people that make a difference are going to be in front of the kids no matter what happens. And I want to make sure, and this is why we invited the teachers to be part of this process, that no matter what we end up with, the teachers have the tools and the ability and the structure to make a difference for the kids in the classroom. I want to make sure that I don't have teachers coming back and saying, we can't get it done with what you've created. So that's why they're integral to this process. So when we look at these models and sustainability, now our second grade class size is our lowest in the school district right now. It just turned out that way with the number of students. And the only reason I use this is because this was printed by C&G newspaper, and they printed off all the other schools in second grade. So I had to compare second grade to second grade. But when you look at that, our class sizes are pretty good. And even when we look at our other average class sizes within K-5, they're all within the 20s. Mostly around 24, 25. So some people always look at the grass is always greener. It's not always greener in some of these districts. And I can tell you from being in other districts, there are 5th grade classes in some of our districts in our area with 32, 33, 34. And I never want Ferndale to be anywhere near that. But if we look at, we have 37 teachers right now with an average class size of 24 across our entire K-5. If you raise that by 1, that gives you 2 teachers where we can get world language back. World language was something we heard from a ton of community members about wanting to get back. It wasn't cut because it wasn't good. It was cut due to budget. And part of that is trying to balance class sizes is very difficult in the current system we have. And these aren't our actual numbers, but just to give you, if you have 62 in building 1, you need 3 teachers to get an average of 21, because if you have 2 teachers, you have over 30. Building 2, you have 91, you need 4 teachers. Again, if you do 3, you have over 30. Well, that gives you 7 teachers and an average of 22. If you have some sort of combined way to do it, you have 6 teachers, it gives you an average of 20, 25. Once again, it allows you to have staff to do other things. So in trying to get world language back, it's due to a staffing issue in trying to figure out the staffing issue. One of the things that's been put up multiple times is where we are as a community. This is not the fault of any parent. This is the fault of the district and the policies and the procedures the district has been operating under. And we can see that there is a difference between our buildings. And what should our buildings look like moving forward? That's part of the ongoing conversation I think that we're having. But one thing we do know when we look at our research, that ability grouping has minimal effects on learning and has some great negative effects when we group by ability. And that ability grouping limits students' schooling opportunities, achievement, and life chances. So there are some people that have said to me, well, Blake, trying to make a more diverse building means it's a social experiment. The reality is, I would say we're a little bit behind the times in Ferndale, because what we have seen over and over and over across the United States is that if we do education right, we train our teachers right, all kids can achieve, and all tides rise. But we have to do it right, and we have to do it mindful. And I think that no matter what we move to, we can move that needle. We just need to be mindful of how we move that needle. So what's some of the input we've received on this issue? So what did everyone agree upon? These are things that we heard no matter where we went. Diversity, the diversity of the district, the diversity of classroom, the diversity of the community. We heard a lot about project-based learning, which is good educational, technique. World language, wanting world language to return to the district. About the fact that we have excellent teachers that we trust. And that a component of service learning, that education is more than just math, science, English, social studies. We want our students to be well-rounded in what they do. What are some of the things that we heard from our high school students? One of the best things about our school is diversity. I am ready for the world. And we hear this over and over. Teachers made learning fun, and we knew them well. We had a lot of students that hated the perception in the separation between JFK versus Roosevelt and Coolidge. And once again, that isn't anything the parents caused. That's what the district caused. And that's something the strategic plan is looking to try and move the needle on to stop that division and that separation in some way, shape, or form. They love project-based learning and service projects. And one student said, I felt degraded. It was like if we didn't get into JFK, we were at the Roosevelt Coolidge, and we didn't matter as much. And no matter where we went, we heard from parents that even if they got in via the lottery, they didn't like the system. They didn't like that people did not get what they wanted. And so that's something that's hard to address in any system. But I think, again, we can move the needle on these. But it's a slow process. We don't change perception, and things don't necessarily always change quickly. So what are we hearing from our teachers? What are your priorities for a high-quality school? Again, diversity, we heard loud and clear from the teachers. Sustainability and stability. Having been in a school district that went through some pretty horrendous cuts in a former district, teachers want to feel stable. For them to stay in the district and to be committed, they have to feel that the district is stable and sustainable. And our talent is in the classrooms. And so we do need to make sure that we are keeping our talent here and fostering that talent. They want strong leadership. They wanted updated materials and resources. We haven't had a line item for textbooks or materials in years, which is sort of counterintuitive. We're a school district. And we shouldn't have textbooks that say, and maybe someday man may land on the moon. Oh, and not that we have those, but just we need to make sure that we have the money to update the materials so that teachers can educate the kids appropriately. They want parental involvement. Ongoing parental involvement is very important to our teachers. They'd like to have one-to-one technology, more access to technology. They'd like to have manageable class sizes to try and do our best to get balanced sizes for them and to make sure that they have a group of students that they can work with well. So in looking at our two models, said that we erased B from our original group of models that we're looking at after getting community input. We have our teachers that will be coming up here to go through Model A here in a second. So what are we keeping in all schools, all model? Regardless of what we move to, there will be project-based learning. There will be outdoor education. There will be self-directed learning. There will be student mentorship. There will be standards-based grading, which means not letter grades, but benchmarking. What you're currently seeing in most of the open classrooms, which is looking at what are you learning? Not, oh, you just got an A. What are you learning? And how do we communicate that? In vibrant parent involvement, regardless. Regardless of either model, these are great educational things that we need to do. And these are all currently parts of the open classroom that are excellent, that we see great results from. But we're continue to have band, orchestra, music, art, and gym. We're not losing any of that. All our special education programs, our current intervention programs, and our current curriculum and workshops that are reading, like Reader's Workshop. So we're not looking at losing anything. But what are we gaining in this? Our goal is to have more enrichment opportunities. We need more opportunities, as the strategic plan said, about our high-end students. More ability for advanced math, bringing in some international honors level curriculum, having the focus studies, built-in enrichment time, systematic support starting at kindergarten. If we can work it within the budget, world language. It's again one-to-one technology, as long as we can be sustainable and working into the budget. By downsizing our buildings, we'll have more district funding to maintenance of buildings. We'll have a sustainable and right-sized district. We'll have a focus on extracurricular opportunities, and we'll have more focused professional development for teachers in either model. So this is what we're looking at gaining within this process. So I'm going to invite, I haven't looked at the PowerPoint. Let's see here. Invite our two teachers up here to present for our Model A.
Hi, good evening. Do I have to have this? Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. Good evening. My name is Danielle Cover. I teach first grade at John F. Kennedy.
And my name is Teresa Harvey. I am the reading specialist and instructional lead teacher for ELA at Coolidge.
And we're here to discuss the first model of the restructuring that we have as options. A couple things I wanted to touch on that I have touched on in a couple other presentations is some of the things that Mr. Pruitt has mentioned as well. That this truly has been a community collaboration and something that we as teachers feel honored to be a part of. I worked in different districts before I came to Ferndale. This is my 5th year here in Ferndale schools. And there are many districts that will make decisions and say this is how it is. And it is unfortunate that is that way, but I appreciate the opportunity to have my voice heard as a member of the community, because we are the ground floor when teaching your children. We're there every day seeing their faces. And so having a voice, having something to say, and feel like you're being heard makes you feel valued. And I know that I feel valued for being able to give my input to this process, and feel that this is something that needs to happen for our district, both because of the inevitability of budgets and funding, but also for what's best for all children in Ferndale schools. While I have the perspective of coming from JFK and teaching in the open program, I've also had the opportunity while teaching in the last 3 years to teach in the multi-age program, when both programs were housed in one singular building. And I can tell you how very difficult that is as well. So this different perspective that I have, while it's not one of longevity through the district, I've seen lots of different parts in my very short time here. And so with the history of restructuring, I know that it's been difficult for many families who've gone through this before, but I think this is a change that will bring about a better one Ferndale for our district, whatever decision is made. So I hope that as community members that you feel that your voice has been heard, and I do, I feel like this is something that will really benefit all Ferndale schools and all Ferndale children who come to us in the future. Looking at Model A as it is presented, it is 2 K-5 schools. One is an open classroom school and one is an international school. The difference between the two schools is highlighted in the boxes, but also one of the things that's a key component or something to realize when looking at these models is that the open program is a philosophy of education and the international school comes with a curriculum. And the curriculum is what we use to teach children. A philosophy in terms of education is almost a way of being, a way you believe in children and in teaching and how you come into the classroom. And so there are many teachers throughout the state and throughout the world who embrace different philosophies. Many of these are core tenets of the open program because they are outstanding educational practices. Looking at the open program through the open classroom model, in this model, we would go to multi-graded classrooms, K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. Classes would run on a continuum, a 2-year loop with the same teacher, creating a rookie pro kind of system where veteran students with that teacher would assist in mentorship for the younger students coming into that classroom. There would be a focus on community service learning. Right now, throughout your schools, you may know of different service learning projects that your children might be doing, but many of those are grade level based or classroom based. And so through the open classroom, in this model, would move more to a community version of service learning. Continuing with outdoor education and camp, having focused studies of instruction and designing flexible learning spaces for students to be able to move in ways that they are best able. In the international school, the highlight is critical thinking and inquiry-based instruction and highlighting an international curriculum that's been proven in many different countries around the world. One of the things that's very interesting about the international curriculum is that what a 5th grader is learning here, if we had the Cambridge curriculum, they would also be learning as a 5th grader in China through the same curriculum, through the Cambridge curriculum. So that is one thing that the international curriculum brings to the international school and program that would be different from anything that there was here currently in Southeast Michigan. The emphasis on higher order thinking skills and developing world language, having one-to-one technology at 3rd grade level and above. As with all of the different models, there's parental involvement that remains as it is, and with some additional opportunities for parent involvement throughout both schools, which is why it's highlighted under both items. Some of the things that are familiar to many of you, book in a bag or pull-out programs such as Math Facts, where parents take students out to give them additional skills instruction, as well as supervising technology projects with an increase in technology that will be more necessary as we bring those things into the classroom. As part of this model, there would be an office to help coordinate parent involvement with a board or a community board to help with the volunteering to make sure that parents and teachers have their needs met for volunteers. There are times when teachers do need volunteers, but with a smaller pool of volunteers to pull from, don't always have those opportunities met. So with a larger board that could help teachers do that and meet needs of classrooms, more children receive services from those volunteers that are valuable to their education. This board would continue to support current volunteers and find additional opportunities. Sometimes there are different bigger projects that you might want to start in your classroom, but there are only so many parents who can come to volunteer in your classroom throughout the day. As we're building a One Ferndale community, there would be opportunities for parents, for volunteers across the district to help come fill that gap in different schools and different grade levels to be able to help meet that need. Classroom volunteer control would still remain, though, with the classroom teacher, volunteer coordinators, and being able to decide where those needs are for each specific teacher for different subject areas. One of the things that's a little bit complicated about choosing a program for a child when they are 4 years old is determining what their learning style might be that matches one of these programs. I've explained that children at the age of 4, when they would come to us to be sorted into their houses at Hogwarts, would have to have you as their parent, yes, know them very well. I would like to say I know my 3-year-old very well. However, I would know that off the bat, most 3-year-olds, most 4-year-olds are very kinesthetic learners. They cannot stop moving. And so if I had to decide right now what her education would look like, she might grow into being a very different style learner as her time as a child moved on. Also, it's been shown that students have different learning styles for different subject areas and for different developmental ages. So selecting a style that you believe your child would match at the age of 4 may not continue to match as they went up through the grades. So that might be something that would be difficult to determine at that point. One of the things about learning styles that is important is that one of the things that's the most impactful on students' learning is that they enjoy learning. And that's where they get the most gains from their education, not necessarily based on a program or a style. One of the differences, and many times are often confused, are learning styles and learning strategies. And learning styles are preferred modalities to receive information. So kinesthetic learning, auditory learning, visual learning, hands-on learning. Those are styles of learning. But learning strategies, these are the things that your child's teacher does in the classroom every day. Small group instruction, hands-on, having manipulatives, being able to engage students who need fine motor support, or having different tactile experiences for students who need the focus. Those are all different learning strategies that kids need. And that's what good teachers understand and recognize. It's more difficult to cater to specific learning styles because, as I said, a child's learning style changes within the classroom almost daily, depending on what they're learning, how they're feeling, and even as their age develops. So learning strategies is how students learn. It's what makes children successful. And so if we rely just on learning styles, we're taking away part of that education that they could receive if we weren't able to focus on what are more sound learning strategies, which helps children advance educationally.
Okay, again, my name is Teresa Harvey from Coolidge. This is my 3rd year here in Ferndale, but my 9th year as a teacher. And as Danielle, Mrs. Cover said, I'm extremely grateful to be part of this process, to be involved in some of the decision making, as well as being in the loop and being able to present to our community. I quickly fell in love with the students here in the Ferndale School District. They mean a lot to me, and I'm very, very passionate about wanting things to be equal, diverse, and to be the best for all students, no matter where their ability level is. I feel very strongly with that, so I'm glad to be here. With any model that we choose, as Mr. Pruitt stated earlier, there are pros and also challenges. With this first model, Model A, as Danielle presented to you, some of the pros that we have is, first of all, either way, whatever you pick, they're 2 what we call gold star choices, meaning they're research-based, and we're assuming that either choice you make for your child, depending on their skills and strategies and ways of learning, would be a plus, no matter which you pick. As a matter of fact, if we end up adopting this Model A, we're hoping that the choices will be so great that it will be a tough decision for each and every family to make, which one is best for my child. It also meets, as we talked about, the needs of 2 different styles of learners. The open philosophy has a lot more of the project-based learning, self-directed learning, multi-graded classrooms, whereas the Cambridge is a very rigorous curriculum that we would be using in the classrooms, and it would be based on the international standards rather than the Common Core curriculum that would be used in the open school. There are multiple building options that we've been looking into that we have available to us if we choose this model, and we would be able to have vertical alignment of curriculum in each building. So the curriculum in each building would be vertically aligned, but across buildings, obviously it would not be because it would be 2 separate curriculums. One good thing with this model is both schools being K through 5 would lend itself to longevity of relationships, not just with students and teachers, but also with the families and the staff in the school. Kindergarten's students would see other teachers that are second grade teachers and third grade teachers and so on, and they would become a little bit more familiar with those teachers as they moved through the grades, get more used to their curriculum and the expectations and the requirements of their school. And then also it would mean that there would be fewer transitions because they would be in a K through 5 building, and then the next transition would be on to middle school. Another thing is it would enable us to have student mentors, where students in the upper grades, 3, 4, and 5, can mentor K1 and 2 students. And it would bring the community into the classrooms with either model. And then, of course, it would be a continuation of the open program, which is important to so many of you and so many of our families in our district. Of course, too, there are challenges to any model. And the challenges that we face with Model A is, as she spoke to a little bit ago, Danielle, that we're not able to always determine a child's learning style at 4 years old, and even if we can, it can change over time and depending on the subject area. So you may choose the Cambridge program for your child, and they start off in kindergarten, first, second grade, and it's discovered that, I think they would have been better off in more of the open philosophy and multi-graded rooms. So that could be an issue. And then depending on parent choice, like I said, we hope this is a really hard choice. If we go with this model, we hope to make both schools very attractive to our families and to outside families that we're hoping to have come into Ferndale. With that being said, if one program is highly sought after more than the other, then that could lead down the road to another possible lottery situation because one may fill up faster than the other. And that's something that we're really trying to avoid here in the district now. Also, there may be an inability because of one program being a little more attractive or sought after more than another, that we might have trouble still balancing class sizes. Right now, we can see that at some schools we have larger class sizes in the same grade than we do at the other elementary school, and that could continue on if more families are choosing one program or one school over the other. Also, with that being said, it would be hard to determine equity across the buildings. It's all up to family choices, and that makes it more difficult to be sure as a district that we're equal socioeconomically, racially, in learning styles, learning abilities across the district. And then it also leaves limited collaboration for teaching staff. There's no vertical alignment between the two buildings because we would have two totally separate curriculum. One building would be using the Common Core with the open philosophy, and the other would have that Cambridge curriculum, so they could not collaborate together on what they're doing and share what they're learning and what they're seeing and what they think their best practices are. And then it would also be difficult to implement the best practices in terms of blending a traditional and a progressive way of teaching. And what we mean by that is the open philosophy would continue with the Common Core curriculum, but the international would have the Cambridge curriculum, and it wouldn't be a hybrid of using both the traditional and the progressive ways of teaching. We would either have strictly one model or the other model at each school. And what teachers know is that the best practices are a hybrid or a merging of those two things. So that would make it a little bit more difficult from a teaching standpoint. So those are the challenges that we would have with this district model. But we also have come up with, since we last met, some solutions that Mr. Pruitt's going to talk about.
So we've been able, since our Since our last meeting, we've been able to look at some possible solutions that we've gathered from the community. And I want to clarify something regarding the Cambridge curriculum versus Common Core. I'm trying to remember if Beth is here this evening. If we have questions later, Beth is our guru on Cambridge, so she might pull her in to talk some. But the Common Core was developed from Cambridge curriculum. So it covers all these state standards that need to be covered for students. So it isn't vastly different from the Common Core, but there are differences to it. So it equally prepares students for what is now called the M-STEP. But there are differences to the curriculum, but it does cover everything that Common Core also covers. So we've heard from the community that it is very important in this sort of model to require ongoing community and parent education on the difference between the programs. We're going to need to be spending a lot of time getting word out there of what these are, and especially to our younger parents. And continuing ongoing education is going to have to be a central part of what we're doing with this. So one of the things that a couple of people have come to me about is trying to look at how to project where the buildings are going to be. And so if we look at possibly assigning the buildings by neighborhood, and parents could opt for the other building, but just we wouldn't provide transportation as one option. So there's different ways we can look at that in terms of there being building assignments for people that don't want to choose, but then have the options for parents that do want to choose either one, have a time period for that, to try to be able to even out enrollment somewhat is a possibility. Instead of doing a lottery, just accepting students on a first-come, first-served basis, and a wait list is done by application date, so that there isn't a drawing of names, but it's just by when they come in, is a possibility. So these are all things that have been floated by us since our last meeting as possible solutions to some of those problems. So I wanted to thank Danielle and Teresa. Thank you very much. All right.
I feel like it's like an apple unveiling or something. It's so fancy up here. Yeah, exactly. All right. I'm Mike Thomas. I'm a kindergarten teacher, and I'm very proud to be up here and presenting one of our models, and that I get to present with Heather because we are like lifelong best friends, and we get to collaborate, and we're very excited to present this model.
Hi, I'm Heather Banowitz. I teach kindergarten at Roosevelt. I know many of you. Some of you have probably heard me say this 3 times already, but I grew up in the district. My family grew up in the district. My grandfather went to Taft, one of the first classes, if not the first class, to attend Taft. But my great-grandfather also built a house in Ferndale, and just a quick cool little story. So he built the house. The whole family lived there. Fast forward like an entire century, and I'm in high school in this building. Happened to run into the person who lives in that house. He goes home and says, "Oh, hey, I met the girl. Her family lived here. Her great-great-grandfather built the house that we're living in." He says, "No way." Goes up to the attic and pulls out this picture of my painted of my great-grandmother. Or it was my grandfather's mother, so yeah, great-grandmother. And all of these artifacts that have been lost in my family that got returned. So, like, I look around and Ferndale isn't just my job or my residence or, something that is just my family. It's like my long family. It's my history. It's my blood. It's who I am. So this is really important to me, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. So thank you. But I'm presenting Model C. And Model C is really an open classroom philosophy merged with the Cambridge curriculum. And there'll be a lower campus and an upper campus. The lower campus would house the K-2 students in our district, so all of the kindergarten students, all the first grade students, and all the second grade students would come together in one building. And same for the 3 through 5, all the third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade would come together in one building. And the lower campus would really focus on the whole child, where the upper campus would focus on a problem-solving, critical thinking approach. Of course, we would rely heavily on the parent involvement, as why it's banded across for both schools, as well as use the best curricular practices for that age level.
So, open classroom and building traditions would continue across both of these buildings. So, project-based learning, we know that helps students to cement all of the learning that they are acquiring and projects that we would hold on to, the heritage project that happens in first grade, the virtual trips that happen in second grade where students get to go to Japan and England, and wonderful trips like that and get to experience different cultures. And then in fifth grade, the Wax Museum where they pick like a colonial time or historical figure and really learn about it and then present that information to large groups, the school community, we had them going on during the open house, and it was very exciting. And many others, for example, Oceans Project or Habitat Project that happens in kindergarten that I'm very excited about. And then also building festivals that would help to build a whole school community, K-5. So things like the Fall Festival, Sock Hop, June Fair, and then Halloween Festival, and many others. And then, of course, the outdoor education and camp, because we know that that it's a fundamental piece of the great education that Ferndale offers to students. And then we would have an open classroom office, which would have, which would keep that open classroom feel alive and keep parent involvement happening within our district. There would be the community board or a committee that would sort of oversee that. The volunteerism and parent involvement. They would help with project-based learning. They'd help with the outdoor education, which is also called camp. And if any of you know me, you know I love my control, and so it's still very local in the classroom. So if teachers need volunteers, they reach out to their families, but they have another resource that they can reach out to this office and say, hey, I have this really big project going on, and I need to, get more volunteers into my classroom.
So the lower campus would really focus on the whole child, the social development, the emotional development, the academic development, and would have project-based learning, some of the open classroom components, the flexible learning spaces. We would still keep current practices, the readers and writers workshop. We would have the Cambridge curriculum for science and Spanish, as well as the embedded technology. And it would really be like a springboard in building that solid foundation for later in the 3-5 building. And the 3-5 building would use the critical thinking and problem-solving approach. They too would keep some of those open classroom practices and marry them with the Cambridge, the project-based learning, the Cambridge curriculum. Some teachers at Coolidge are currently trained in the Project Lead the Way, which is part of the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math. So that would be done on a larger scale. As well as one-to-one technology in 3-5 that's different than in the K2. Focused studies where we can really hone in on specific children and specific learning styles, learning abilities, where our highest achievers are, our mid-range achievers, and our students who need more coaching. And then they would also have Spanish.
All right, so talking about the Model C pros, and I'm very passionate and excitable about this. So we would be able to have balanced class sizes across the entire elementary realm. So we don't have some kindergarten classes that have 25 and some that have 18, which is a current situation. And we would be able to better fit students to the teachers. So there are definite different learning styles for students, but there are definite different teaching styles that come with each teacher. And when we have all the teachers in a grade level together, we are able to have those great conversations and make sure that students are getting the very best education that we can offer them. We have unity from the very beginning. We are no longer this school and that school. We are Ferndale schools, and that's a very exciting piece for us as teachers. We have more opportunities for interventions and accelerated learning, and I can describe the model pretty quickly, but what would happen is we would have target time, so it wouldn't be like all day that students would be moving around, but we'd have a target time to help us meet a certain academic goal. So let's just say that it was in reading. So we know that students are all over the board. We have some really strong readers, some right at grade level readers, and then we have some readers that need a little bit more support. What we would be able to do if we had all the teachers at a grade level together, we would would be able to have one teacher with the high students, so they're getting very focused instruction that helps them just to grow. We would have one or two teachers with the at grade level students being able to give them exactly what they need and hopefully moving them into that higher group. And then we would have the majority of what I like to call all hands on deck, so reading specialists, interventionists, resource room, parapros, teachers, working very focused with students who are struggling and who need a little bit more support. Because even in that group, if we said students who aren't at grade level, there are students who aren't at grade level for very different reasons, and we'd be able to give them very focused instruction to move them along the chain so that they are at grade level and then hopefully moving even further than that. The enrichment would be built into the day, and just as Heather was saying with focus studies, because if you have a whole grade level together, you would be able to provide some enrichment activities. And not that this would necessarily be one, but even if it was something like knitting, if there was a group that was really into that and that was their way of artistic expression or what was helping them, we would be able to do that because there could be a group that's with a teacher doing that while others are in other enrichment activities as well. There would be Spanish from kindergarten, and we know that if students are exposed to a foreign language at a very young age, they learn it quicker, and not only that, they're more susceptible to learning future languages as their education goes on. So they might start out just having that French or having that Spanish background, but then when they move into high school, they might be able to pick up French too, and now you have a student who's able to speak 3 languages going out into the college or career readiness world. The one-to-one technology, and a big focus of it is on the 3rd to 5th grade through the Cambridge curriculum, but we have amazing K-2 teachers that would advocate that if we want students who are ready to go, 3-5, that we need those resources for K-2 as well, so don't worry about those K-2s. And the program components would be embedded into every elementary class. So we would be able to make sure that we weren't stuck to just one philosophy or one program, that we would really be able to pull pieces that we felt were the best fit for all of our students. So we have to get to the challenge piece, but there's that transition piece that would happen after 2nd grade, so another transition that students would have to make. The transportation piece that we would have drop off and pick up for families, that could become cumbersome. And Heather always says, these are all really fixable, and I totally agree. It's a move away from just a separate open program, which I know makes a lot of parents feel very scared. And I don't think that we should. I feel like we should be embracing this because it gives us a chance to really grow ourselves as a district and meeting the needs of all of our students. It has the limited age range, so in the Model A, they talked about student mentorship, and that might not be able to happen as well in a K-2, 3-5 building, but I don't believe that that's true because in my kindergarten classroom, I've always had 2nd grade buddies, and they're great mentors. And my kindergartners directly relate to them. They're not so big that they think, oh my gosh, when I'm that big, I'll be like them. They can think, wow, I can be just like them. Creating a K-5 community with the 2 buildings. So Model A talked about that you have that longevity, that the teachers know the students from K all the way to 5th grade, and that students are with each other as well. And that is a little bit of a sticky situation for the K-2, 3-5, but with different like elementary events such as the June Fair, the Fall Festival, sock hop kind of events, we are able to get the whole district community together. Again, sorry, I already spoke to the student mentoring, and then the community acceptance of the change, because it's something different, and we all know that there's a little bit of fear in change, but I said embrace it. And then, same thing as with Model A, leg has been brewing. That's also a solution.
So we've had some solutions that we've gathered from the community and just from looking at some research out there. We know that there's always an issue of transitions. There's always a concern of transitions, especially in a district where maybe that has not always happened well. And transitions can be stressful. This is on a whole paper and article on elementary transitions. These stresses can be mitigated by practices such as between school visits, mentoring by students from the other school at the more advanced level, special assemblies for new students, communication between the faculties and administrations of the two schools. We would really look at this school, a K235, really being one K5 with one administration that is working together, with one person that would be in charge of both buildings together with some assistants. So that we'd really work on building one community between the two buildings, and also trying to make sure with the buildings being Roosevelt and JFK that they're in close proximity to each other so that we can do more combined events and really work at one parent group and trying to make sure that we have things as combined as possible so the transition is as least stressful as possible for the students, so regardless of building, they feel like both buildings are their home. In talking about busing, we look at that all K5 we picked up together, so younger brothers and sisters, older brothers and sisters can all be together. What you generally do in this sort of configuration is you drop off at the lower school first, then at the upper school after, and you pick up the exact opposite so that the older students are always on the bus when the younger students get on. So that they can all make sure they're there together. They can all be dropped off at home together because a lot of the older students will watch younger students when they get home. Or if it was like when I grew up, my brother didn't watch me at all and didn't care. And it's very important to have ongoing education to all community members and the benefits of this model and how it continues the tradition of a Ferndale education, since it is the largest departure from what we currently do. So there would be a need for a lot of ongoing education if this were the model chosen. And ongoing listening to the community. Just upon the last week and a half, based upon when we presented information, we've received a lot of information from the community and still tweaking things. So regardless of what gets approved, it'll continue to grow and continue to work forward based upon the comments from the community and the teachers and the people involved. So we would need to continue making sure that we are responsive to the community. So at the end of all of this, this goes back to our mission. Ferndale Schools' mission is to provide all students with exceptional education that prepares them for college careers and success in a diverse society. And we do this on a three-legged stool, or think of it as a triangle: achievement, sustainability, equity. All three of these need to be met. All three of these need to be part of the conversation. One is not more important or least important. And I don't think that there's anything as a district that we can put forward that's going to achieve all of that. But I think what we've put forward tonight, regardless of what the board decides, moves us in the right direction. And there are things that we'll have to address and continue to address each year, regardless of the decisions made. Because every year is different with the kids that we see in the classroom, and we have to continue to adjust to them. So what I'd like to do at this time is open up the floor for questions. We have microphones, or if you're comfortable from your seat, it's just on the recording, we won't be able to hear you. And before I start the questions, I just want to be clear: if we don't have an answer, I'm going to be honest and say, we don't have a firm answer on that. And we'll, if you give me your information at the end, we'll get back to you on that information. Because I don't want to speak and say something, or any of us from administrative team to say something in error. And you might come up with things that we haven't thought about yet that we need to continue to look at. What we would look at is for some lease space. Previously, Adult and Alternative Ed leased space at a Crossroads building near Northland Mall. So that is one possibility that we've already explored and been at that facility. We housed it there prior. And then we also have a list of other facilities we could look at leasing, which is actually less money than what we're spending on the operations and maintenance of the Jefferson building right now. Yes, ma'am. That is one possibility, yes. So, and what the state does, the state allows, it's called site improvement, where the bond funds can be used to take down a building, and then the sale of that land has to go towards the operations and improvements of all your other buildings. So we would actually net about $600,000 to $700,000 on Taft and Wilson in order to put back into the other buildings. Yes, ma'am. we would have to make sure in either model that we are equally preparing the students for the middle school and high school. And part of that moving in the 6th grade into the middle school helps. One of the things that people have said is, well, if you have a open in a Cambridge building, and if you have the honors Cambridge program at the middle school, aren't the Cambridge students better prepared? And the way that, and Beth can correct me if I'm wrong, the way that the middle school Cambridge program works is that you don't need the elementary. What you need to have is just good skills. I will also say I'm a firm believer in taking risk on students. Tests are only one piece of an entire student when you look at taking a student into a program. But the overall goal of either model was that students are equally prepared for moving forward. Just as we assess every year, if we find where there's a discrepancy or deficiency in either building, or even in a particular classroom, we have to look at the data each year to address that. So the goal would be that, no, it wouldn't matter where you go to school, that you're equally prepared for the middle school. Yes, ma'am. It would stay within the kindergarten. Mhm. Correct. I agree. I would love to pay our teachers a ton more. At least 3 of them, I'm deciding. No. Guess which one? But that goes back to the sustainability, and that's part of the strategic plan in order to retain good teachers. If we're putting more money into buildings into non-instructional areas, which we are off on that percentage, then we're not putting it to teachers. So that's part of the whole plan, is to be able to put more money back into instruction, which would also be into teacher salaries, hopefully, if the state keeps giving us money, hopefully. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry about that. What he said was that if people know. Yes, ma'am. Yes, thank you for clarification. The question was, is it a definite, Spanish a definite in Plan C, but a question mark basically in Plan A? And I would say, and anything that we're adding, it is a question mark based upon budget. So if Governor Snyder decides to cut us $75 per student, that changes what we can offer. Now the goal is overall with Plan C, in general, when you look across that type of plan in other districts, you have what's called economy of scale, so that it does cost you less in terms of number of staff. So the belief is, if all things being equal, we would have more money to put towards a foreign language teacher if it were Model C instead of Model A. But it is all due to funding of what happens within the state. Yes, Mr. Foreman. Let me have him answer that, because he'll be much better able. Answering that, if we're working with students across different classrooms, are students going to be changing a whole lot of classrooms within that Model C? Was the question, correct? Right.
So the answer is no. It would be one targeted time, so it would directly relate to a PLC goal or a data team goal that we had, where we saw that there was a very particular deficit in a certain group. So whether it be reading, writing, math, that way we could really give that focused instruction to the students that needed it. Both groups too, the ones that are way high and the ones that need a little bit more support.
Yes, sir, all the way back. I'm waiting to get some more information back, but there isn't a ton of resale on that at the moment. So the realtors and then also Plant Moran, it's debatable what that property is worth because there's nothing really right in that direct area that is selling for property for houses, since it's more towards an industrial area. So I don't perceive if we were able to sell it, we would get much for it, is my gut level and is what I'm hearing from the realtors. But also we know that there is a law that's trying to be passed regarding charter schools and vacant school buildings. So we want to stem the tide from that happening also. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, back there and then up here. 1.6 million. But it is split between Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge, right down the middle, literally. Currently, Ferndale is would love to redevelop the Taft and Wilson area and the parks and redevelop those neighborhoods. So we'd be working in those properties in concert with City of Ferndale to try not only to develop the land, but then also develop the parks in both areas around that. So it's a little bit different situation with the Roosevelt property, being it between two municipalities. Yes, ma'am. So the question was what it would look like for people that are currently in open within the Model A. That's one of the inherent problems of Model A. We don't have a set solution to that. So we would have to have a group, if that were the choice, to work on a solution to that. Luckily, we have some time to do that, but there isn't a set solution, and we would need to engage parents and community members within that. So that would take some time. And number two. In terms of times, it's all based upon bus schedule. I could perceive, and I won't put Dee on the spot back there, but Dee is phenomenal in the transportation department. She does all the schedules and does everything for busing. Is probably one of the best people in the county for that. So we've got a gem back there, and she won't stand up and take any credit. But when looking at the Model C, when you have a K235, if you do the drop off at the K2 first and then go to your 3.5, per se, if it was Roosevelt JFK, then you'd have whatever time it took to drop off and move to the next building. If it's 2 K5s where you're sending people to different buildings, then it's a little bit different situation. So the times really are reflective of the busing. Does anyone want to speak in terms of what the classroom day would look like? I know Ms. Rushlow had something that we talked. She had generally some pieces of that. This is times. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. Yes, sir. Welcome. Great. And I'll try and answer that some, and if you want to jump in after I start. The first piece is that regardless of any school, we all have the state mandated Common Core curriculum, the state mandated test, all the way K-12. So every student learns, that curriculum. Whereas the open is more of a philosophy and a style of education, where Cambridge is not only the Common Core curriculum, but pulling in pieces of international curriculum. When a student gets to middle school, it's, the 5th grade, they learn X, in math, they're learning fractions. In sixth grade, they learn the next step. And that keeps, moving forward. So within the middle school, we were looking at doing a Cambridge International Honors Program for the extension for the students that can really be advanced, so that we have that for those students. But it is all the same curriculum as they move forward. And really, especially when you get to secondary and you have a math teacher, a science teacher, an English teacher, social studies, they're going to be doing the best practices in that area. So instructionally, when you get to middle school, high school, what a math teacher is doing is sometimes very different than what, per se, the English teacher is doing, because you're getting into much, much more specific pieces. But in many pieces of that open philosophy, your project-based learning, more your one-on-one, those are just good teaching styles that any teacher does. So, what you try and do as you move forward is make sure that you're getting more specific in the subject, regardless of it's an open or it's a Cambridge. The reality is that we have great teachers. And so they're going to take whatever building they're in, they're going to take what they're doing and make sure those students are well prepared and they've got the right pieces moving forward. So I don't know if any of the teachers want to tag on to that. Okay. Okay. Oh. Yeah, Beth? Sure, here.
Hi, my name is Beth Grillo. I'm the ELA curriculum coordinator for the district. One of the things we've been working very, very hard on the last few years is vertical alignment, so that teachers know, kindergarten teachers know what 12th grade teachers are teaching and vice versa. So this is something that we will be continuing for the foreseeable future. That vertical piece is so important, so that we know that kindergartners move directly into first grade, move directly into second grade, and we're building on those skills. But at the same time, we have similar ways of teaching. We have the workshop model K-12, and kids are progressing in a logical way that helps them. So the Cambridge model will be in the middle school next year, hopefully. And that will lead directly into advanced placement, helping our students succeed in those tests in the high school. So we're working very, very hard, and we'll continue to do so. Did that address? Okay.
And because you said that you might be new to the district, I'm going to give you the 10-second sales pitch. Coming from someone who's new to the district, who's been in many other districts, and I think for the people that have been in Ferndale a long time, you forget what a gem we have. And even though we're going through this process, most districts wouldn't go through this level of process and this amount of interaction to do what's right for kids. Most districts, it would be superintendent on high is going to say, we need to do this, and it's going to give maybe one session and then take it to the board and it's done, and the community's going, what happened? That's what's great about this community is A, the care of the education, B, the care that the teachers have. You're not going to find a more committed group of teachers and administrators anywhere in this area. And for all of you, you know that when you put your kids in the classroom in the morning, they're going to be taken care of, and you know they're going to be taken care of K-12. And even just looking at this building, we have all the great facilities and abilities, 21 AP classes of a large high school with all the attention of a small high school in a small community. So we do have something great here. We just sometimes forget to talk about it. So, all right, I'll go off the soapbox. Next question. Yes, ma'am. And the board has been at all these different sessions as well as getting all the information. So the 12th is the board study session, where in an open forum, they start talking about, what they know, where their concerns are, to give myself, the administrative team, any other directives in terms of information they want, or if they feel they have enough information. So that's the start of the process with the board. And then from that study session, they decide what the next step that they want to take. Any question? Correct. and that's something that we're currently working on. So we have a couple plans that we're working out. Some of it depends upon the models that are adopted. And there's some possible retirements coming up from various people. So what we've tried to do from the summer to this year is not fill positions to try and make sure that we don't per se have to move to a layoff situation. So if you can do it through attrition, that's always the better way to do it. But it would be a downsizing of some staff. Yes, ma'am, all the way in the back. Sorry, for what? Oh, for the so the question was, what about enrollment? So the first piece is, enrollment's open all year for residents. There is a window for students at our school of choice. In both models, any building would be open to any student. So there's no limitation on any student or any parent. So as long as there was room within the building. So whenever a parent goes to enroll their child, if it was a K2, 3, 5, obviously there would be room. If a resident enrolls, we have to have room. In the 2K5 model, it becomes more difficult. If a parent enrolls their child and says, I want the open building or the Cambridge building, and that building's full, that's one of the inherent issues of that model, that there's the possibility the parents don't get the building that they want to get because there isn't space. But the enrollment is open to all students. There's no requirement within enrollment. Yes, Ms. Toomey. Oh, okay. Sure. So within the Model A, because of it being 2K5s and not being something where parents can choose, we would have to make a decision. Is it neighborhood-based? Is it application-based? Is it a combination? That's a piece that if that were in the model the board were to put forward, we would have to figure that out because there is no great, easy answer to that. There's always a possibility of someone not getting the building that they want regardless of if we do it geographically and with the ability of people to choose. So that's one of the hardest issues with that model in order to try and figure out. Yes, sir. Right, Roosevelt will be K2, but we also have money within the bond to do some work within the building. So that's something we'd work with the teachers on in terms of if we were to move whatever program would be in there, what's some interior work that we might need to do in order to make things better for the classroom environment. And same with JFK. There's some work that would need to be done within that building, within some of the rooms and some of the areas to make it a little bit better. Yes, ma'am. Oh, there have been many urban legends. They've been quite fun. And the reality is that probably just about every one of them was discussed at some point, because that one was discussed. That was a parent idea that came up, said, listen, if we could be at Jackson and at JFK, the proximity would be great. So I actually did the work with Plant Moran of what it would take to repurpose it to an elementary. It was astronomical. The building's also built on silt. So we'd have to offer some geology lessons, because if you go in there, some of the floors are like this and separated from the walls. So just about every possible type of configuration was looked at. Now, once again, the board can direct administration to say we'd like to look at some other buildings or some other configurations, and that's fine. We have all the information on that. Yes, ma'am. No, there'd be fluidity as long as there's room. Yep. Unless it was Mr. Thomas and he was just trying to kick a kid out of class. Yes, ma'am. Correct. I mean, besides Harding, but oh, I'm sorry. Yep, sorry that there would be no physical building within Ferndale beyond the middle school, high school complex. Was the comment. There's, and we should have clarified that, was what is the volunteer office or the open classroom office? The volunteer office was in Model A. The volunteer office in Model C is the open classroom office. Because one of the things in talking with different community members was looking at, can that office in Model C expand to be more than just volunteerism, and look at having pieces that keep that tradition of the open classroom alive. That would be up to the board, but yes, we could. Yes. Sure. In terms of the overall resident district is what you're talking about? Yeah, and I'm trying, it's how many students are in the entire open program versus what would be brain-based. I want to say it's about, 509 to, is it 391? So 509 would be in open, 391. So one of the other urban legends just that was out there that sort of relate to that, and the numbers might be off a little bit, was that Roosevelt and Coolidge were almost all school of choice. Those buildings are only 20%, 24% school of choice, if I remember my stats correctly. So we're talking about, all three buildings are resident buildings. So just something else that that was thrown out there the last couple weeks. Yes, ma'am, all the way in the back. The Montessori was approved for just one classroom as a pilot. And if it were Model A, it would be within the open building. If it was Model C, it would be within the K2 building. And it'd be just a classroom, and not looking to recommend it anything beyond that. But based upon a lot of input that we've received in the last couple of weeks, we're looking at that piece as the board moves forward. Yes, ma'am. Right. Right. Yes, ma'am. No problem. Right. And I don't disagree. That's one of the reasons why we're re-looking at it. So that based upon those comments and other comments. Right, and that the genesis of the Montessori was only looking at students that weren't coming to us. Yeah. But yes, and that's one of the reasons why we're reassessing it. Yeah, Liz? No, we are not. The question was if we're still looking into University Middle School. we found that there wasn't quite that population because those students do charter school K-8. So wanting to leave in 5th grade doesn't equal a whole lot of students wanting to come in. Yes, sir. The JFK building has a lot of space to add on, and it, especially if we were able to sell land, that money could go into, a pot where then rooms could be added. There's actually a lot of space there to add on. Yes, sir. JFK is in Oak Park. Roosevelt is split literally down the middle between Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge, and then Harding, which would be the preschool, is actually in Ferndale proper. Coolidge is in Ferndale. Yep. Correct. Yep. So. Yes, sir. It's a number of things. Some of it is we have a lot of 1920s buildings. And if you've ever owned a 1920s house, there's a lot of ongoing work. Part of it is that when we look at the last bond, originally it was for about $44 million to address all the needs. Well, it was at 22 because that was the amount that we could really go for that would, that wouldn't be too astronomical within the community. So you look at that, there's $22 million worth of work that the district identified that can't get done. And simple things, although they're not all that simple. We had an 8-foot sinkhole in the football field this year, so that cost us money to fix. That's money that could have went somewhere else. Or the boilers went out last year at Jackson at CASA. That's $200,000 have to be reallocated from somewhere else in the bond. So it is just the aging of the buildings. So, yes, ma'am. Correct. It's looking at where that philosophy is district-wide, where it's K-5. I guess I don't understand how it's creating the divide, but could very well be, yes. Sure, go right ahead. Here you go.
Part of what we're trying to do with these different models is to embrace part of the open philosophy, even in Model C. Open classroom is a philosophy of education. It's not a program. It's been used as a program here in Ferndale schools and contains many best practices that we continue to use and you would want for your children. Not necessarily in its name, but in its strategies, in its ideas, because what they are is what's best for kids. 30 years ago, this was considered incredibly innovative and forward-thinking. Now, that is what they teach teachers coming out of college, but they don't call it open. They call it what we call best practice. Because a lot of the traditions that are founded in the open classroom, they want to make sure that those things are still part of our school and our district. So I think that in name, it's to help make sure we embrace those traditions and make sure that there's a driving force in our schools to keep those best practice things with our schools, because those are what's best for kids. So classroom teachers will continue to embrace the open classroom traditions, whether or not they're open, because those are the things that teachers have been taught are what's good for kids. So I think the title is to help to bring those things into all classrooms, because it's to help kids learn the best that they can using the philosophies that we know are best for kids.
We have one or two more questions before I know we need to wrap up, and we'll be available. We'll be available all evening. Yes, ma'am. It has. That was part of our initial conversation back in the fall. Part of the success of University High School is the fact that it is a separate institution and they do things very differently than, per se, a traditional high school. So trying to keep their model moving forward of what's being successful, trying to move them here to the high school would not equal the success that they're having. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. And on that note, so if you have any additional questions, we'll be around. Thank you very much for your time. And the board does have a study session 5:30 on Thursday at Harding. Thank you.